Hello, this is History Shorts with the Artifactual Scholar. Today, I'll be talking about the Pastry War. A conflict called the Pastry War might give rise to images of chefs armed with rolling pins fighting about croissants or petit fours, but in reality, the event was an armed conflict between Mexico and France in the first half of the 19th century. During the 1820s and 30s, newly independent Mexico was in a state of political and economic turmoil. The rise and fall of successive leaders and governments led to social uncertainty for Mexican civilians and foreign nationals, as looting and rioting were common. One foreign victim was a French pastry chef, Monsieur Remontel, who in 1832 claimed that his shop in the town of Tacubaya, near Mexico City, had been ransacked by Mexican officers. Remontel demanded compensation for his losses, and when he was ignored by Mexican officials, he turned to the French chargé d'affaires in Mexico City. The pastry chef's complaints, along with those of many French citizens in Mexico, soon came to the attention of French King Louis Philippe's government. Relations between the Mexican Republic and France were complex. France was Mexico's third largest trading partner, and many French businessmen and entrepreneurs resided in the country. Yet France did not have a formal trade treaty with Mexico, which meant that French goods were taxed at a higher rate than goods from the United States or Great Britain. Also, the Mexican government itself was in debt to France and French banks. So when news of Monsieur Remontel's pastry shop reached France, the government responded. The French demanded 600,000 pesos as compensation from Mexico for the lost property of French citizens. When Mexican President Anastasio Bustamante refused to pay, France dispatched warships to blockade Mexican ports. Diplomacy and negotiations failed to resolve the mounting crisis, and in November 1838, French ships began bombarding the city of Veracruz. In response, Mexico declared war against France. Several days later, French troops, under the command of the Prince de Joinville, attacked and occupied the city. At this juncture of the conflict, the deposed former leader of Mexico, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, reappeared on the scene. Santa Anna was driven from power in 1836 after the loss of Texas and had been living in retirement at his hacienda outside of Veracruz. With the arrival of the French, he offered his services to the state. Gathering a small army around him, Santa Anna set out to attack the French. The Mexican attack failed to dislodge the invaders. During the skirmishing, Santa Anna's leg was severely wounded and was later amputated and buried with full military honors. Despite the French success at holding Veracruz, the war had reached a moment of inertia. The French hadn't planned on invading Mexico and lacked troops for further offensive action. The Mexicans were unable to push the French out. Also, a British naval squadron had arrived in the Gulf of Mexico, ostensibly to protect British interests and trade, and caused concern for France, which did not want to stumble into a conflict with Great Britain. So France and Mexico asked Britain to mediate the dispute. In March 1839, a peace treaty was signed between the two parties. Mexico agreed to pay the 600,000 pesos in installments as compensation to the French, while granting France several trade agreements. In return, France withdrew their troops and ended the naval blockade. Though the Pastry War was short and militarily insignificant, its legacy was profound. The once disgraced Santa Anna, who had resurrected his prestige and reputation, would soon regain the presidency of Mexico and, disastrously, lead his country to war against the United States in 1846. The Mexican government never made any payments to France, providing justifications for a second French invasion in the 1860s that ultimately led to the creation of the short-lived Mexican Empire. And for much of the rest of the 19th century, Mexico remained economically compromised. This has been History Shorts. Thanks for watching.